Giants at Cowboys, Monday Night Football. It's my best bet. First, though, Marco, what should bettors be looking at in your opinion?
They got to figure out if Dallas has tossed the towel yet or not, or because it is Monday Night Football and a division game.
Let me answer this one for you.
Go ahead.
If you have in my opinion, if you have a good coach and your back's against the wall, that's when a team plays best. When you have a bad coach and your back's against the wall, that's when there's pointing in the locker room, when there's players start looking out for themselves. All the dysfunctions that you see once a team, and we talk about this in college, loses that game, which makes their seasonal goal not a possibility. Clearly the Cowboys, with the Super Bowl here in Dallas, had high expectations. To me, they're in a historically almost impossible situation, especially now that the NFC East has actually shown itself. You know, it's been a real seesaw with the NFC East. Early season, people thought they might have been the best, or preseason, the best division in football. Then after a couple of weeks, people were like, no one's very good. The Giants, which we'll talk about, have stepped up. Philly has stepped up. Washington's proven themselves to be pretty good. Dallas could be the worst team in the division, and I don't think they have much chance at playoffs. And if it's going to be pride, you can forget about it.
Well, I agree with almost every point that you made. I am not a fan of Wade Phillips, and I think the big issue with them this year is not so much the leadership. He has no discipline over this team. They're making the same mistakes. It's one thing to make a mistake, but when you do the same thing 2 weeks in a row, that's just lack of discipline. You got to learn from your mistakes. And I'm talking about the celebration penalties that they had in the games, and it cost them the week before. The other thing is they are a 1-4 team, but do you realize the 4 losses all have been by 7 points or less?
That's the whole point, is that this is a team, statistically, they're the #1 defense in football. Vegas considers them the 8th best team in the NFL. ESPN says they're the 26th. Vegas says they're the 8th.
Have you noticed one thing with when we do the polls? ESPN's poll, to me, is almost like John Q. Public.
It's reactionary.
That's poll was with their eyes.
That's why I use it. And again, I think part of it is in the John Claytons of the world don't know better, because they clearly are high experts. They probably know the NFL better than the odds makers. It's that I think that with the 24-hour news cycle, you got to talk about, you can't, like imagine if John Clayton went on after the Cowboys lost 2 or 3 games and said, listen, there's a randomness to the NFL. There's been a couple bad bounces. The Cowboys are no worse of a team. You know, like for example, Vegas has Alabama as the 3rd best team in the country even after they lost, because they say, hey, they lost the game. It was a tough scheduling spot. It doesn't change how good this team really is. But if the ESPN guys did that, there wouldn't be anything to talk about. So I think the whole zig and zag of all this is partially, and I don't even know if they're doing it consciously, is they've got to talk about what just happened, and I think they overemphasize it.
They do, and from just a general 30-second handicapping tip, I think that's why a lot of handicappers really do struggle with the NFL. They say it's one of the hardest sports to handicap. And I'm on the other side of the fence with that, because I think there's so much value, because there is no sport of any of the sports that we cover that public perception is more evident than in the NFL in building into the lines with the odds makers.
And to me, there's 2 ways, and just 2 weeks ago on ESPN in Los Angeles, I do a weekly spot on Friday with them. They say, what's the hardest sport to handicap? And I tell them, actually, the NFL, if you're a public perception reader, where you get a sense of the public perception and take advantage of their misperception, the NFL is the #1 sport for that. And college basketball in a small conference is going to be the #1 sport for purely handicapping who's going to have a better chance of winning and assessing that better than the lines makers. So if you're someone that likes to fade public perception or misperception, the NFL, I think, is #1.
I think you hit the nail on the head with calling it perception.
But sometimes it's misperception, for sure. I actually I'm just not fading the Cowboys here. I actually like the Giants. And in a classic handicapping scenario is when a team has a lot of turnovers early in the year, and we all know in the NFL that really results in losses, that typically that's going to even out throughout the year, and that they're likely underrated because of those turnovers. And the Giants really have had one really bad game on national TV against the Colts that a lot of people remember. And then they had the turnover game the next week where they actually outgained the team. And it might have been the Redskins. I can't remember exactly what the game.
They played. They lost to Tennessee. They lost to Tennessee bad.
It was Tennessee. That was it. And it was a situation that they actually dominated the yardage and lost the game. And really, this team has played really well since. I think it's a situation where they're undervalued. And if you're telling me that really at 3, you're telling me the Giants and the Cowboys are even teams, not to mention the fact that I think Dallas their backs aren't against the wall anymore. I think they've likely, like we said, become dysfunctional. I think there's a ton of value on the Giants, and that's going to be my official best bet this week, is taking the Giants to actually win the game straight up 24-20.
At this point, I have no opinion on the game, but I'm going to do your role and play devil's advocate with you and fire some things out. I'll give you a stat here and see if this bothers you.
Okay, we're out of time. Oh, wait, go ahead.
You've got the Giants. There's no question that they're playing better than people thought they would play. But if you break down their season and look at the games, they've scored 31, 34, and 28 points against the Carolinas, the Houstons, and the Detroits of the world. But in the 3 games that they played against teams with winning records, which would be...
How's that pertinent here?
Okay. But we all, again, Dallas has a good defense.
I don't think the Giants are one of the top 5 teams in the country.
But my point is they've only scored 14, 10, and 17 points against Indy, Tennessee, and Chicago. It goes back to where do you really put the Dallas Cowboys in that mix.
And again, I think that if you're looking at their ability to win a close game, I think they're in the bottom half of the league. I think to me, this is almost a pure value play both ways. I think the Giants are slightly underrated, but just slightly. And I think the Cowboys are probably 2 units overrated. I think that, to me, the Cowboys might be 18th or 19th. So I'm in between Vegas and ESPN. I think the Giants might be 12th. And if you give me a superior team at home or on the road getting 3, and here's my last point, the Giants have covered 10 of 13 against the Cowboys. This is a big divisional rivalry. The Coughlin just has dominated, and I'm getting 3, and there's a small chance the Cowboys could just fall apart. I mean, I don't know if it's a 10 or 20% chance. They might lose this game by 30 and completely give up.
One thing, when the risk you run if you take a team like Dallas when things have been going bad, is it is a snowball effect. If the first
Especially
thing goes,
when the character is a question.
Absolutely. If one thing goes bad in this game and the Giants get a quick score off something, you can't have a team just fall apart.
Any other? I shot that one down pretty quick. Anything else?
That's it, sir. I'll let you have your spotlight.
Right. Now it's your turn to continue the conversation. Maybe you guys can shoot holes in this game a little better than Marco. Speaking of that, though, if you haven't watched it, Marco is going for his 8th straight best bet winner. That's available at pregame.tv. On this game, you can continue the conversation in the comments section. That's it for this week, and we're going to be back next week breaking down the biggest games from a betting perspective. See you then.